We've been talking about the civil system, and we know that the birth registrations are generally referred to as civil code registrations or civil registrations in general, which came basically from the origin of Roman civil law. And when we're looking at the names that occur on these documents, especially when we're looking at the surname, of course, the name that's assigned being what is known as a legal person or the body corporate. In fact, the Canadian Law Dictionary defines that the only person known to their law is the body corporate. So the body corporate means dead body. And because this corpus or corporation, which means dead body, speaking oration and corpse together, we have an interesting concept that stands out if you're really looking at it, because that refers to or stands for the dead, the legal surname being that in its symbology in Roman civil law. We also see the fact that if they underlined it, that would be a deadline. So what's unique about the Ontario registrations, they underlined the majority of the surnames during the 60s and the 70s. And basically it emphasizes not only just an error, but it also represents, to an extent, almost what we would see to be a deadline. Now, when we look at what Scripture talks about, God has always given a warning before he brings destruction. So at the time of Noah, he had Noah warn and preach in advance that the world was going to meet its end by judgment if they did not accept the salvation of getting into the ark to prevent themselves from drowning in the water of the flood. In the final judgment that's spoken of the Bible, it talks about fire. So it's interesting when we go down what we're going to talk about right now. When we look at the deadline, we know that there's a time date, but we know Scripture was quite evident out of Christ's words that he says that no one would know the day and the hour, not even himself or the angels, only his Father would give the time to go and execute judgment upon the world of unrighteous. When we realize this, it makes it much more concerning that we know that there's a choosing of sides between what is right, what is wrong, between God and Satan, because there's two paths that are definitely out there for us to elect to choose. And unfortunately, the majority of the world has gone down the broad way, not the narrow path. And there is still time, because God basically is merciful and caring, and he doesn't want to see anybody end up in destruction. So he's placed enough time on a deadline in order to when he's going to execute judgment. So we look at the book of Matthew, chapter 24, and we're going to start reading at but of the day and the hour, which is verse 36, but of the day and the hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only. But as the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days that were in before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and knew not until the flood came and took them all away, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Now, we have a time, and we have the ability. We know that many would have looked at that ark, and all they had to do was walk in there. There was no charge to walk into that ark. It was free. But unfortunately, the majority, the vast majority, only 8 survived the flood. So how many in the population was there at the time? We don't know. Matthew Henry's commentary stated, or at least made an estimation. He says, compared that the 8 that entered the ark for salvation were 8 out of 800,000. Possibly, maybe Matthew Henry knew more about the population count at that time that would have been. I don't know how he would have arrived at that, but if we're looking at that, it's a very, very small amount of people survive. So the vast majority will unfortunately meet destruction, and only a small remnant of God's people will actually make it through. So we're dealing with a choice factor And therefore there is a deadline, and God definitely has drawn that. This is not a time to, basically wait. There's enough, I would say, knowledge in the book, the Bible, that gives us the answers to what we should be doing and what we shouldn't be doing. But unfortunately, people are not seeing very simple things. Of course, with water baptism, it would certainly protect you from God's fire. So that's symbolic of that. Those that are baptized would certainly be immersed in water, and water is one of the biggest preventatives against fire. Maybe this is coincidental, possibly in its comparative that I'm doing here, but I can see this, and so therefore we have this opportunity to be immersed under the protection of God, and that is what your Christian name represents. It represents love, God's love, and it's a promise. It's a fact. You carry that basically protection in that name. Once someone says that they are a Christian, then they're saying they're the property of Jesus Christ. That is under the supremacy of God. Once someone says that they are basically going to surety a title that only is effective in the legal citizenship world, well, then they said that they're now of the seed of the serpent. They're part of the fiction, the father of the lie. So these birth records basically are only basically registering a legal fiction or a legal event that only pertains to a fabled genealogy, something that doesn't mean anything other than in fiction. It's not reality. And so people that are caught in the non-reality basically cannot see this. They don't have eyes to see and ears to hear. And so they cover their ears up and they go la, 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 because they don't want to know the law. They don't realize that Christ basically prevented us from the execution that would have came by the law had man been adjudged as basically with no hope under what Adamic sin brought in. So Christ is the escape clause, and because your God-given name, which was purchased, whether you're righteous or unrighteous, that availability is there for you because he died for both the righteous and the unrighteous. So the choice was there. So that's why in English law, it's always deemed that your God-given name is your Christian name, and therefore whether you want to believe you have one or not based on backgrounds from different countries and whatnot, this is something that was given to all, and that's why it was come out of her, my people, okay, coming from all nations, from all these different divisions that seem to be in the world. They're all given this opportunity. So we have a protection, and it is the blood on the doorpost when the angel of death passes over, as it did in the time of Moses with the nation of Israel escaping out of Egypt under that basically pagan bondage. So there's so many comparatives, but you don't want to be around on the wrong side when God fires the population that isn't on his side.